here we are again for another Thoughts on Walks, and today you're joining me on a lovely bit of Downland in Devon. It's very nice. And I don't know how long this episode or this walk is going to be with you, because I bought my gimbal but it's flat, so I'm having to walk along holding my hand in the air, which does get quite tiring. It might only be little, but my gains aren't helping me so much for this. So I'm going to swap hands every now and again to see if I can work on that. But as I was heading out for this walk, I was thinking, oh, Ruth, will you stop thinking? No, my brain is always on the go. Anyway, that's a joy for my husband to live with. Anyway, I was thinking about how we can often think about the things that we have to do, but maybe we separate them too much. And by that, I mean, I'm quite organised with what I have to do for my job. I write lists, I've got things in my calendar, I put my workouts in my calendar. But often the things that are making me feel on edge, like, oh, I mustn't forget that, are the little jobs, like my son having a DOV walk on Saturday and needing to make sure that he's got everything that's ready for that. And the fact that I'm very lovely, exciting, off to High Rocks next week with Claire, and I haven't booked my train ticket to where I need to go, so I need to deal with that. And it's those sorts of little jobs that are nothing really, but they all add up. And what I find really helpful, swapping arms again, what I find really helpful is actually just writing it all down, ticking them off, getting the small wins. You know, it will take me 5 minutes to book a train ticket. I'm just putting it off, because when it feels like there's a lot of things to think about, we can put them off. But there's such a thing as, you know, decision fatigue, and I'm doing a podcast on that you can listen to it a bit more in depth about on the Ruth McFit podcast. But these little things that are in our head, they might feel like nothing. And then the danger is that we start thinking, I don't know what's wrong with me. Why am I struggling to eat, drink, whatever in the way that I intended? And the answer is likely because your brain is full of other things, and just getting it out your head can be so helpful. And by getting it out your head, like having a brain dump, for me, after this walk, because this walk definitely will help me feel a bit calmer, as long as I'm just not using this walk and talking randomly to you the whole time. But the walk will have me feeling calmer. But I'm going to go home and I'm going to write down all those other little jobs and break it down, because sometimes in our heads they can seem so big. In reality, when we get them down on paper, they can be quite small. Oh, it's got really windy. I don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, they can be quite small. And my husband described it to me a while back as like our brain being like I'm going to say carp pond, but a pond full of fish. And the fish are swimming around, and the fish are our thoughts. They're swimming around, and it's really hard to focus on one. They all get kind of jumbled up together and it can feel like a mess. But when you pick the fish out, don't do this in real life, we don't want to kill any fish, but when you take one of those thoughts and lay it out on paper, it stays still. You can focus on it and you can think, that is what I have to do or I should do next. So that's what I'm going to do when I get back, because there are those little jobs that are kind of on my mind, but they're quite small. And I see it often with clients. I know that I had a check-in yesterday, and it was actually, I had a check-in today like this, where the lovely woman was like, I don't know what's happened. I've been able to focus before. I know I need to eat better, whatever it is. I don't know what's changed and making me not be able to do this now. But then at the same time, she had a course going on and various other things going on in life. I won't go into individual details. And she was tired because she wasn't sleeping particularly well. And it's no wonder really that we get that element of either decision fatigue, cognitive overload. There's too much going on in our minds, and it can make it so hard then on top of that to start thinking, well, what am I going to eat today? Like, that's a small thing to decide in theory, but it becomes quite hard when your brain is already swimming with other thoughts. And yeah, it's no wonder that she's struggling to focus on it. And that's why I always love to go with those habits that make it feel easier. And when you've got lots to do, you'll be like, oh, I really can't cope with focusing on one more thing. But the one more thing that I'm talking about is something that, in theory, should make life easier. So much easier. I mean, for me, it's definitely the evening routine. And if I can then add on to that, getting some time on a Sunday. Just love a bit of time on Sunday to just know what my breakfast and lunches are. We've, our evening meals are pretty good. We kind of have like the things that we eat fairly regularly. If I don't plan my breakfast and lunches, then I really can just feel like I'm winging it through the day. If I'm eating enough protein and veg, for example, or protein and fruit, veg, fibre at my breakfast and lunches, then I'm less likely to overeat during the day. I feel better, my energy is better because I'm getting the nutrients that I need. It's when I start winging it that things get harder. So just a little thought about how it might feel like we're adding more to do. I haven't got time to do that, let alone do an evening routine or some prep on a Sunday. But actually, those things free up your brain space so that you can focus and be more productive with the other things during the week. It just makes such a difference to feel calmer. And so if you are feeling a little bit stressed or overwhelmed or feeling like, why am I struggling at the moment? Then rather than thinking I need to do more, sometimes actually it's I need to stop for a moment. I need to do a little bit less. I'm feeling overloaded. That's what my thought process is there. This can happen with illness and injury as well. Those of you that have followed me on various social media will know that many years ago I had something called rheumatic fever, which is an autoimmune condition, which is from having a strep throat. I would always beat myself up. I didn't ever take that time to think ahead or plan. And I think part of the fatigue leading up to that, the stress and fatigue that I was feeling, was actually mental exhaustion. And so when I got strep throat, I didn't listen to my body at all. I didn't take time to go, should I train? Should I work out? Should I do this? I actually just carried on trying to do everything, trying to be superwoman, trying to be a good mum, trying to be a good wife, trying to still continue running because that was what I should be doing, right? I mean, it's bonkers when I think about it now. Trying to be a good teacher at the time as well. I was teaching back then anyway. And what happened is I think I got progressively more burnt out. But the problem with things like chronic stress is you don't even notice it anymore. You don't even know it's there. It's just part of life. You think it's normal and it isn't. Like, I didn't think, or I just think I thought there was something wrong with me. I was always tired. I was somebody that was just always tired. And it took me years to realise that it was mental exhaustion, probably a lot of it. And then I was adding on to that physical exhaustion as well. And I'd love to say that getting ill and actually taking a moment to reflect and think was the turning point for me. And in an extent, or to an extent it was, like I had to rest. But it's taken years and years for me to really learn what that means and to stop and actually listen. Like, I've got high rocks coming up with Claire. I've had a bad back. And that old part of my brain still wants to go, you should still do a workout. But the sensible side knows that I will feel better for resting. I'm going to go in fresher if I rest and do some active recovery like these walks. Going back through the gate. But that was, 11 years ago now, I want to say. And really each year that I'm working on this just gets a little bit easier. I end up feeling a little bit more calm in how I approach my day, I would say. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, but unfortunately, sometimes it takes getting really ill to realise that your lifestyle, your mentality isn't helping you, and that actually sometimes doing less helps you do more. There's a saying that I quite like, and it was actually said to me in a business context. It was like, sometimes you need to slow down in order to speed up. But I think we can apply it to anything. We can apply it to fat loss, we can apply it to fitness. The times where things don't work are normally because we've approached them too fast. Does that make sense? So if we think of you wanting to get back into running, you haven't run for ages, you want to get back into running, and you start running, and annoyingly you get injured. But the thing is, you didn't start off with walk running, did you? No, that'd be crazy. You're annoyed with yourself because you used to be able to run at this pace, so you went out and you expected the same from yourself, and you kept pushing, and then you end up with shin splints or something else from a bit of an overuse injury. Because even though cardiovascularly you might feel like you can do it, our body needs to build up and get used to it. So sometimes we actually need to make ourselves slow down in order to speed up. And with fat loss, we know probably from experience, those of you that have been yo-yo dieting for years or have a bit of an all or nothing mentality, going into a large calorie deficit, reducing them really low, is the reason that we then give up. It means that we might see some quick weight loss, but when we do start eating what we define as normally again, we end up actually eating more, gain more weight. And I remember years and years ago, I mean, I'm talking like probably in my 20s, maybe into my 30s, I would go on a diet and I'd think, oh God, I can't wait for this diet to finish so that I can go back to eating what I normally eat. But it seems bonkers now, but it didn't even really occur to me back then that if I went back to eating what I normally ate, then I'd just gain the weight again. But I think if you're questioning that and feeling like that, then there is a good chance that you are putting too much pressure on yourself in the approach you're taking. See, I'm starting to wind onto this tangent, aren't I? There we go. She's definitely tangenting, really is thoughts and walks. And I see it with injury as well. And this is in my mind because I'm struggling with a bit of a niggle myself. And I think sometimes we can get really annoyed that we've got this injury, and it can feel like it stops us from doing what we want to do. But then we don't rehab it. We don't do the exercises that the physio gave us because they're really boring, right? They feel a bit like, oh, such a pain to do them. And we don't do them. And then we keep on with this niggle, and we're annoyed that we've got it because we used to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And actually, I feel like I point fingers at my husband quite a lot, but he's had a rotator cuff problem. He's like, I still can't train properly in my upper body. I was like, well, firstly, having a rotator cuff issue doesn't mean you can't do any training at all. And secondly, you're meant to be doing some rehab exercises to make it better. It's not that you can't do anything. You can't just hope it just disappears on its own. So, don't listen to us, do they? Actually, he does know. He does know he's doing it. It's just have to figure it out for themselves sometimes. And actually, that is the case with coaching. Now, I always say that I really like working with people who can be introspective, who can kind of look within. It sounds kind of woo-woo and so on, but it's being able to look and actually be honest with ourselves and go, I do that, and it probably isn't helping. And I am just going to focus on that. I can do it and so on. And you can't make people change in any area of life. You can't make somebody think something. You can't make somebody believe something. But you can guide people. But ultimately, they are the ones that are taking the actions. They're the ones that are going to have to do the rehab, or the ones that are looking to put in strategies to make fat loss easier. You can't make people change. So I remember once, this is again, random thought, I remember once getting a request from somebody for coaching, and they wrote on there, I'm annoyed that I have to do this. I don't want to do this, but I've been told that I have to in order to do something else. And if I'm honest, I'm pretty pissed off about it. And I was like, I mean, that doesn't sound like somebody that actually is wanting to lose weight. I mean, maybe if that person started embracing the changes, she'd realise how much better that she feels for them. Maybe. But it is very hard to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. You know, making people change. I spoke to you about it last time. We can be scared of doing things because we're worried about what people think and so on. But I think, well, I've learned to listen. Sometimes we get just that feeling that we're like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't something I want to do. And you hear people say, you've got to do what aligns with your values. And you might think, I don't know what my values are. Like, truly, like family, whatever. But you're like, I think you do know. I think we get these messages telling us that either we don't want to do something, or we feel uncomfortable about something, or we don't take the plunge even though we feel like we should on something. And I think that that is a sign that it doesn't align with your values. And sometimes that comes down to having a difficult conversation. But I know when I was starting Ruth Fit, the obvious thing to do was to start a menopause coaching program, because I have extra training in menopause. I work mainly with women in midlife. But something about being a menopause coach only didn't sit right with me. And maybe that's because I was younger when I started having problems myself. But it meant that I didn't take the plunge and start the business. And then I was like, okay, what I really want to do is help women know that what they do now can make such a difference to their future. They can feel strong and be more independent. You know, they don't have to get old in the traditional way of getting old. That's what I want to do. I want to help women with that. And it was more recently that I started thinking, yeah, I do want to help women with that. But I also want them to feel great now, because I think sometimes we can end up focusing so much on this is the outcome. And I was like, no, these changes that make us feel good in the future will help us feel good now too. We can feel great now by doing those things. It's just they're setting us up for a great future. And that's where the idea of Ruth Fit came. It was like started as menopause, then transitioned into more about future proofing. And now it's future proofing, but with the intention of having you feeling your best now. So anyway, I don't even know how I got there. It happened, it happened. But I do think that my arm is aching and there's somebody walking behind me who probably doesn't want to be in shot. So we'll say a thank you for joining me and a goodbye. And may you have a sunny day wherever you are. Goodbye.